Okay, Aimee, 10 years ago, what was
Mhm.
happening career wise? What was happening life wise? Set the scene.
All right. So, career wise, I was in a job that I feel like even 10 years later, I can say was a very toxic work environment. And while I enjoyed the type of work I was doing, I knew it was not what I wanted to be doing. And so I needed to figure that out. I had three children. I still have three children, but they were 9, 4, and 2. And married, happily married, still happily married. And But knew that I needed a change in my career and was terrified to figure out what that was.
And without outing any organizations or institutions, can you give us a sense of what kind of work you were doing?
Sure, I was in higher ed. I was working on I was in their development office, so their fundraising arm. And so I played a multitude of roles. So I would work with ultra wealthy alumni, but I also was a systems tech person. So I was doing back end, like understanding like database work and financials and building out like forecasts and plans in order to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for organizations. So I think I share that because I think it's really important from like what I'm doing now, to understand sort of like the background that I had in it before I
Yeah,
actually did it.
yeah, we'll get there. But I appreciate the connective tissue. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So you know something's got to change. So what do you try? What's your move to try to change things?
So before joining your program, one I always had this entrepreneurial like spirit. I was always like fascinated with like how businesses worked and everything. And so I had a business that I was doing. It was a dress company for little girls, and I really enjoyed the operational side of it, but I found out very quickly how expensive it is to manufacture in this country. And so I think that where I was that I was like testing the waters, trying to figure out. And I actually think, Laura, now that I think about it, I think I found your website. I think you are on maternity leave. And I like purchased something, and I knew that you had this program, and it was like I purchased that to be like, I think this is the person, like intuitively I knew that your program was going to help me. But I was just sort of like waiting. And I can't even think of what that was that I purchased, but there was like a compass involved, and I don't even know what it was. Does that even make sense to you? Like I have
Probably
not
an
thought of.
ebook. Yes,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
days of old. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, that's really like I think I was just really trying to figure. It was like the knowing that something needed to change, not knowing how I was going to do it, finding your website, figuring out like, okay, when is her program going to open so that I could try to see what that's going to work. But I've always been open to trying new things to figure out what aligns. So I think that there's always, that sounds very wooey, but I feel like there's always been that like element of like, I'm going to trust that this is the right path and that I'm exactly where I need to be, um, type of vibe.
Yep. And going into making this change, I know you said you were scared. Like, what were you worried was going to happen, or what do you think you couldn't figure this out previously?
So I think one of the things, like there's a couple of things. The first thing was that I am one of four children. I was the trophy child. I was the overachiever. And this job that was a toxic work environment was this job that everybody, like it was like I made it, and I should be happy. And I was completely miserable. And I think it was and then like financially I was making really good money, and so there was just so much in turn. And the house that I live in now, like we had built it, so we had built this whole entire life around the way that my husband and I were earning, how we earned money, and these like stable 9 to 5 jobs. And the idea that I like that wasn't what I wanted to be doing was terrifying. And then trying to figure out how I was going to make that happen, and then even how I was going to tell my husband that this wasn't the path. Like this is, I was like, I'm heading in the wrong direction, and I know that. And I think that was sort of the biggest piece, was that I just knew that I knew that there needed to be change, and I was terrified of what that meant, because I knew that our lifestyle, which wasn't extravagant by any stretch, but I knew that there was like, it wasn't going to be like, oh, I don't want to make my six-figure salary anymore because I want to go do this. Like I just knew that that wasn't going to land well with my husband, which I completely understood.
Yeah. Okay. So you get to your career homecoming. What happened? Why did it work?
I think it worked because well, so I think the fact that I was working in this environment that wasn't fulfilling, I feel that it really was like, there was almost like no fear, because it felt like I was living like my worst situation, that it was like, I if I do the work, it has to get better. Like whatever this is going to tell me, it's going to be better than where I am now. And I wasn't blind to the fact that it wasn't going to happen overnight, but at least I felt like, okay, I would have direction, because I felt like I was just at a standstill. So I would say that that's probably like the one thing, was that willing to do the work. There were all these different components, and I showed up and I did the work, which I know might sound obvious to some people who are watching this, but I was definitely someone who would like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna do this and it's gonna be great, and then I just like would stop midway and everything, and I just knew I could not stop, and I knew that if I kept following through, um, I would I would get the answers to at least get started on a different path.
Yeah. Okay. And pray tell, what was that path?
Okay. Well, oh, the other thing I should say though is like the thing that came out was this whole idea of being a bookkeeper. And it was my ego was not happy about that, because it seemed like it was so like, here I was like, in New York City, wining and dining with these like multi-millionaires, and then I wanted to be a bookkeeper. Like it just, there was like a lot of like, how was I going to spin this one? So there was embarrassment around what it was that I was thinking I wanted to do, but I knew that that was. I knew that that wasn't the final destination. I just knew that that was the path, like that was where I needed to go. And so it was to start a bookkeeping practice. And so in terms, do you want me to just talk about like my pathway from the time I like 2014 was when I graduated, and I identified this as the career pathway homecoming. And then it took 3 years to actually see that fully realized. And do you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's helpful for anyone who's considering entrepreneurship. And like everyone's journey is a little different. It is impossible to pinpoint by year three, you're going to be able to quit your day job, or but I like, as an example of your story, yeah, let's hear a little bit about what
Okay.
that
Awesome.
crossfade looked like for you.
All right, cool. Oh yes, crossfade. I'm like, all these words are
Mm-hmm.
coming back. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. So the first thing that I did was I had a very long conversation with my husband, and was really like, this is what I want to do. I need to figure this out. And I did this huge like family budget, and it was a very overwhelming task for me to do, because it was the reality of what I was going to have to create from a revenue perspective in order to to transition out, was going to be significant. So what I made sure that I did was, I am not someone who could like, we're just going to burn the boats and we're going all in. It was like I was definitely going all in, but it wasn't with like not having any sort of like lifeboat available.
That's right.
So I left the job. Um, I left the job that I was in, and I actually ended up getting a part-time job consulting for an organization doing the same type of work. And the other thing that we did, my husband and I did, was we actually hired a personal finance, like investment person. And the reason why we did that was because while we like do our finances together and everything is commingled, um, I'm the primary person. It was really important to me that we had a neutral party so that like it felt like so I felt comfortable, my husband Tom felt comfortable, and that everybody was on the same page. And so what we ended up doing was we actually had that meeting before I left the job. I got the gig like consulting, and then I started working on building out my bookkeeping practice. And actually that person that we hired for the help us with the personal finance and the investment stuff, he ended up introducing me to my first client, who's still a client today. And so then and then the understanding was I had a year to show that financially I could make it work. Otherwise, it was like, we're going to have to find something more permanent until like we figure it out. We turned off like some like retirement stuff and all of that. Like in order to preserve cash flow. So we did very thoughtful, intentional things so that we weren't, um, hindering our ability to live the lifestyle that we had been living. And within 6 months I was fully booked. So it took 3 years from the start of the graduating from career homecoming to like being fully booked, but it was a 3-year process that felt it felt very mature. It felt very thought out and very intentional. And it was really aligning. Like I didn't like I don't feel like I made any rash decisions, and I was learning a lot. So yeah, so 3 years it took, and
Yeah.
it was worth it.
So, a couple things I want to highlight here.
Yeah.
One, you didn't just throw everything away and burn it down. Okay, there was a transition period that you planned for in a very practical way. That is what we still preach and we teach.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Two, a lot of people who are going into entrepreneurship or are curious about that path are very afraid of the financial aspect. So, you
Mm-hmm.
made sure that you had a financial plan
Mm-hmm.
around all of that. um, there is a way to do this that is practical, that puts in some safety bumpers so
Mm-hmm.
that it's not just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
No,
Yeah.
no. 100%, that was never going like, and the thing was that I knew that my husband was not going to get on board unless there was like a plan
Yeah.
that was strategic and practical and was evidence based and was able to show. And it wasn't because he was like, I think you're out of your mind. I mean, he totally believed in me, but I think it was just, like, I don't know if we had like beforehand, we had built a house, like we had made these very um strategic decisions. And then for me to say, oh, hey, I'm going to go start a business and, like cut my compensation in half for a period of 6 months to a year. And then like with the understanding that I will get it up there. I mean, that was a act of faith on his part. And I think that one of the things that I have found was that that partnership, um, like that was just such a like an amazing like reflection on our relationship and our marriage, that he had that level of trust and belief in my ability to make this happen. Because I don't think if he didn't believe in me and we proceeded anyways, like I think it would have been a lot harder for me to do. So like I felt super supported to do what it was that I wanted to do.
Well, and it's such a testament to the both of you. Some people want things to change without making change,
Mhm.
and that's not how that works. You all
Mhm.
said, here are the changes that we are going to make. We're going to maybe even make some short-term sacrifices so that we
Mhm.
can win the long game.
Mhm.
Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you think it has been the biggest shift for you pre-program and on the other side?
I think that the first thing is that um I'm not afraid of failing because I knew that there was a risk involved here. And it's worked out. It's worked out beautifully. And I wasn't, and I think just like willing to bet on myself was like probably the part that was, and I think like at one, I mean, I've been in this season where it was like, I'm never going to have a 9 to 5 job ever again. And I don't like, I really like, I would be very surprised if that ever were to happen at this point. But I feel like the fact that I understand how to operate the business that I've built. And I've had so many iterations over the last 7 years. And I've done things where I'm like, I didn't really like that. And in the willingness to have an ongoing experimentation that is one that has a controlled environment is probably the biggest thing of all. Because the practice I had just starting out is not the practice I have now. And there were so many iterations in between that, and I'm always learning and adapting. And so I think that there's this I don't know, I think at some point I thought, oh, I'm gonna just make it. I'm gonna arrive. And I feel like I've arrived to different mile markers, but I'm still on the journey. And I don't think that ends. Like at least in my from my perspective, I don't think it ends, and that's totally fine. It's totally great. I'm okay with that. Um, I don't know if I answered your question or not because I feel like it's just crazy for me to think 10 years ago. And I think also like I've evolved so much. Like I think that I've done, obviously I did your program and I've done so many other programs because I think the mindset work for entrepreneur, like you need to have really good mindset and like mental, like strong mental health. Like at least I do in order to make this work. I went through like as the person that did the finance stuff, like I went through like clients with COVID. I was part of a lot of layoffs. I mean, there was over like I was involved in over 150 layoffs at that point, and there's a level of resiliency and just like solid mental health that one needed in order to navigate for everyone
Yeah.
to, but like with the work that I was doing with my clients who had to close their businesses and everything. And the one thing I didn't mention, and I'm going to go off like tangent for just a second, was what I found out. The bookkeeping thing was the thing that started it. And then I remember being on a panel with the local chamber, and there was a CPA sitting next to me, and it was all for like entrepreneurs, like who wanted to start businesses and everything. And in the middle of the panel, the guy says, he goes, listen, I just need you guys to know that if you want to hire a bookkeeper, don't think that like what Amy's telling you is going to be like that's going to be your experience, because a lot of what she's talking about is from like a CFO controller level. And that was such a huge epiphany because what I realized was all of the work that I had done in higher ed leading up to starting the business, it was definitely like strategic, high level CFO type stuff. And I was able to add that as an additional service. So it was like bookkeeping was where it started, but it quickly evolved into bookkeeping being the foundation with the CFO and helping my clients like be the CFO of their businesses, because the clients that I work with tend to be they're all under $5 million in revenue. So they're not quite large enough that they need to have a full-time CFO, but they need somebody in a fractional capacity. And so it worked out really well that I was able to like
Yeah.
slide into that because I had that skill set developed from my career leading up to that.
I'm glad you said that because today, if someone asked me, hey, what does Amy do? I would not say she's a bookkeeper.
Mm-mm.
That's not accurate anymore. And again, this is, if you're an entrepreneur and you're paying attention, your business is going to evolve over time. So, like, yes, we need to figure out what is your starting point, but we also need to make sure folks are able to navigate change both strategically and, like you're talking about, from that resilience point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Totally.
because before we hit record, you were telling me about the basement. Will you tell us about the basement?
Yeah. So we had an unfinished basement. when we built this house. And so when I was doing the program 10 years ago, this was an unfinished basement and it looked like it was like a safe house that the CIA had. It was very sketchy looking. I don't even think that like we had like video cameras at that point. If we did, mine certainly was not on because I was too embarrassed about it. But like I was willing to be, I had it like set up. There was like our Christmas tree box. I think like I was set up there. Like it was like a completely makeshift. There was nothing glamorous about it. But I just think back to those calls and just be and thinking like this is the start of something. And now like, I mean, I have a very different type of setup, but I think it's very humble beginnings, and I love that so much, because there's just it's such a measurement, if you will, of like evolution from like contemplating, thinking, being afraid, like even being on those calls and talking about what I wanted to do, and really not like, part of me was on board, the other part of me was just like, oh my god, people are going to be like, you're a loser, like what are you doing, like why are you walking away from this like amazing job? And um so just the tenacity and being brave and having the courage to like start from there and to where I am now, and just being content with the journey. It's definitely, I think earlier, Laura, you said something about the long game, and I'm constantly reminded at how critical that is. I was a competitive swimmer, um, growing up, and I was a long distance freestyler. And I feel like training distance and pacing, I am constantly reminded of how important that work, um, going back to that work is in this journey. Like I feel like it's the long game, for sure. At least it has been for me.
Right. So we've talked about some of the changes you decided to take on and maybe some of the sacrifices that you made. Can we talk about the payoff? Because it took us a while to schedule this because you were
Hmm.
in Italy and
Yes.
then you were just telling me about your retirement plan. It's like seems like it's working out. So
Yeah.
what are some of the payoffs?
So, okay. So one of the things, is that already so far, I have done over, I'm close to have done $2 million in revenue from this business. And I start off with that only like, not to be braggadocious or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, I promise you that was not what I was making in my 9 to 5 job. But like, there's just been a lot of groundwork and everything happening from that standpoint. So that's the first thing. But as a result of that, like this past summer, my daughters and I, we flew to Italy. We flew into Milan. We went to Lake Como. We saw Taylor Swift there, which was amazing. And I think it's just it's allowed me like freedom in a way that I never don't I don't think I could have experienced, in a 9 to 5 job. I think the other part too is that I love the fact that I create, my ceiling, meaning that like I can take clients on, I can release clients, and I'm never in fear of client like of losing like clients and them drying out, because I know I'm really good at what I do. And that is just a confidence and a knowing that I have because I've been doing this for as long as I have. Like I just know, and I have really low turnover and clients. Like I said, I have like lots of clients that have been with me from like my first two years of business. And now the part that I'm getting to is I'm 46, and all of the plans that we've made, financially is set so that I would retire at 53 and my husband would retire at 55, which is not too far away from now. But with growing this business, I have intentionally not, used the money and then reinvested it and like done things where have not felt in alignment with how I wanted to grow this business. Like at one point, I thought I wanted to do an agency model. I decided that was not what I wanted to do. But as a result of that, I've put away a lot of savings and have a vault of funds that I'm now in a position where I'm like pre-retirement is sort of what I'm exploring right now, and what that looks like. And, you know, and I think the part that's like the challenging thing that I'm trying to figure out is like, I love what I do. I really truly do. And it's more of like, okay, if I'm not doing this, then like, what is it that I would like to be doing? And really trying to like explore that because, I definitely am coming into this next chapter where there's like the pre-retirement and the retirement. I mean, it's 6, 7 years away, which is wild.
Wild.
Mhm.
I know someone listening is still hung up on, did she say $2 million? I know someone is still there
Mhm.
because either they're thinking, well, I could never make that much, or that's too much. I don't even need that much, or that feels so far away. Look, the
Mhm.
point of all of this is not that you go become Aimee. It's not that you become a bookkeeper. It's not that you become an entrepreneur. Um, it's that you figure out what's right for you. It's
Mhm.
that you match your career financially, meaning purpose, contribution, otherwise, to the kind of life that you want to have, and then you go do it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other part too is like I share that because like I'm from upstate New York. My parents were police officers. I am as middle class as like not like I am my own little special snowflake unicorn and everything, but there like I don't have like a network of people that I just, dialed into and everything. Like I earned and I worked really hard to get to where I am. And I will also say that there have been times where, it's like I tell the money, the total earning piece of it as like the possibility and the potential,
Yeah.
but not as a point of like comparison. Because I actually think the part that I find like, and I didn't say this, but I find more um, successful measure of success is the fact that like, all I wanted to do was to be able to get my kids off the bus. And I do that. All I wanted to do was to get a dog and to make sure that it was like it's my coworker. She's my coworker and has been for the last um 7 years. But more of like, I just wanted to build a life for myself and for my family that felt super aligned. And so like, that's what it was. It just so happens that like, I get paid pretty well to do it, but that's not where I started for sure. And it's more of the possibility of what is available to you if you are willing to bet on yourself and you're willing to dig deep and do the work that's in this program. Because I know if I didn't do this work and if I didn't answer the calling, I don't think I would have been here. I don't know where I would be, but it would not have been here in this moment talking to you,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. All right.
Mhm.
Any final message for someone who is in their toxic job and is
Yep.
thinking, oh my gosh, I can't leave. I have built a life around this. This was the plan. I can't rock the boat now.
Yeah. What I would say is that there's a I look back in that toxic job and I am so grateful for it. I never would have thought I would have said that at the time, but if it wasn't for that toxic job, I would never have been bold enough to say, I got to figure out an alternative. So, as much as it may not be the best situation in the present moment, it could be a gift down the road that's giving you the little push that you need in order to go in the path that even deep down inside, maybe your awareness doesn't know, but inside you know that that's the path. I would say like it's temporary and you can use that as leverage to get to where you really want to be. And again, I am not someone who I don't think I was your A student in that class at all. But I did the work and it definitely paid off and I kept showing up. So it's really about saying yes to yourself, saying yes to the potential of an alternative career path, and then also just keep showing up for yourself. But it doesn't have to be done perfectly. I was as imperfect as I possibly could have been. And I still am. And I think just learning to meet yourself where you are each and every day is how you get to where you want to be. It's the long game.
Yeah, for sure. Thank
Hmm.
you, Aimee.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. Thanks. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so if you're watching, bet on yourself. Go to ychworkshop.com, start the free training. You've learned now that the process works. Go learn how it works, and then let's talk. Thanks.